I would do a Don Corleone impersonation if I could, but we all
Please
know that
don't.
that
Please,
wouldn't go
please don't.
well.
No,
I'm the
no.
Vodfather, but I've never seen The Godfather.
All right, everybody, and welcome back. As always, I am your party host, Joe Rivera, and with me, as always, is one of the preeminent ball knowers of USA Today Sports. You know him as Jacob Kamiker. I know him as the Vodfather. Jacob, another week in the books, and obviously, you came close, man. I mean, Kyle Monungai, you told the people about his workload. Drake London, maybe people should start listening to you a little bit more, right?
Yeah, I had a decent week this time around. My big take Jake prediction with Marvin Harrison Jr. came up about 4 yards short of that. So I'm feeling pretty good riding high into this week. I would do a Don Corleone impersonation if I could, but we all
Please
know that
don't.
that
Please,
wouldn't go
please don't.
well.
No,
I'm the
no.
Vodfather, but I've never seen The Godfather, so it would be pretty rough to watch that. So I'll stick in my lane with my fantasy advice. We got a big week coming up. A lot of bad defenses are on bye, so it's going to be harder to find some of these streamers and sleepers that we like to, recommend on this little show.
Yeah, Jacob, and listen, number one, never admit to anybody that you haven't seen The Godfather. But number two,
True.
let's keep this gravy train rolling, right? Let's get right into it with your fantasy sleepers. And number one, I mean, right off the bat, Raiders made a trade deadline move, shipping out Jacoby Myers, and now that room is looking a little bit thinner. But Dante Thornton Jr., one of the Raiders wide receivers, makes your sleepers. Tell the people why.
Yeah, so this just basically boils down to someone is going to have to step up to help replace Jacoby Myers. The Raiders have Brock Bowers, they have Trey Tucker, who's played more snaps than any of their wide receivers, but they have this group of young receivers, and someone's going to step up from there. They do have Tyler Lockett too, and he might play in the slot while they get some of these younger guys acclimated to the system. But Thornton is probably going to be the first in line for increased snaps. He ranks third among wide receivers in snap share this season at 47.8%. And Jacoby Myers have been playing, I think, about 80% of the snaps at a minimum each game. So, he's going to be able to step into that role. And while Thornton hasn't had many catches in his playing time, he just has 5, his 18.8 yards per reception show that he can be a down the field threat. So if he's on the field, he's going to have a shot at making some big plays. Don't love his matchup against the Broncos this week, but hey, stash this guy. And if you're desperate at receiver, he might be the kind of sleeper who gets the volume you need to just say, hey, maybe this guy will go off in my flex spot.
All right, Jacob, and we move from Jacoby Myers' former team to Jacoby Myers' current team. But it's not Jacoby Myers who's on the sleeper list. Rather, it's Parker Washington who makes your sleepers this week. Again, with Myers there, Brian Thomas Jr. out this week. What's going on with Parker Washington? Why is he a sleeper?
Yeah, so lost in this whole Jacoby Myers trade thing is that Washington over the last 2 games has been targeted 19 times. During that span, he has 12 catches for 142 yards. So he's been very productive, and Trevor Lawrence seems to be building chemistry with him. So I think that's going to continue. Travis Hunter is out of the lineup. It will take Myers a little time to get acclimated to Liam Cohen's system. Myers has been in the league a long time, so I don't expect there to be a big learning curve. But the other whole element of this is that Brian Thomas Jr. is banged up. He's dealing with a low-grade high ankle sprain. Try saying that 10 times fast. So we don't know if he's going to play this week. And if he does play this week, he might not be at 100%. That's going to open the door for Washington to maybe be their target leader this week. So again, this is a guy, I hate the matchup against the Texans defense that's allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, but the volume is going to be there. And that's something that in a week where all the bad defenses are seemingly off, that's something you're going to want to hunt down.
All right, Jacob, let's over to Arizona and a guy who we mentioned in the show a couple times and, starts, sleepers, sits. Emari Demercado is again a sleeper for you this week. Why is that? Why do you have so much faith in this guy?
Yeah, so I just want to note that I wrote in my notes for this, are we really doing this again? Because I, maybe I don't feel great about this because look, the Seahawks are really good against the run. So I don't expect the Cardinals to run very well in this game. However, the Seahawks have allowed the second most receptions to running backs this season. That includes a receiving touchdown to Emari Demercado when these two teams last met. Now, we don't know if Trey Benson's going to be activated from IR in this game, but if he's not, it's probably going to be the Bam Knight and Emari Demercado show like we've seen in recent weeks. And Demercado is clearly the better receiver of the two. So given the matchup, I think he might catch a lot of passes this week. And if he catches 5 passes out of the backfield from Jacoby Brissett, it's going to make him a viable PPR flex. Now, There's always the possibility that he has that two-touch game where he has the 80-yard run where he fumbles at the goal line and all our fantasy owners are tearing our hair out again. But I do like him in this spot. I just think this matchup screams, hey, we're going to have to use Demercado more than the other guys in this committee approach.
Jacob, as you just mentioned, a very important quarterback change, right? And that's Jacoby Brissett as opposed to Kyler Murray out there in Arizona. Now, Murray was banged up, he hadn't played in a couple weeks, but if you could put on your fantasy cap and say like what Jacoby Brissett brings to the Cardinals offense this week and the rest of the season potentially, what is it?
So I really like Jacoby Brissett as a player. I think he's one of those classic like guys that you can have as a spot starter. He's almost a little like Ryan Fitzpatrick, maybe less explosive as a passer, but I think Brissett brings a much higher passing floor to the Cardinals offense, and he's a guy that can push the ball downfield a little bit better in scripted scenarios to guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. We saw MHJ posted 7 catches against the Cowboys. That's a career high. Granted, it's the Cowboys. They're terrible against the pass. They're terrible against everything defensively. But still, you saw a concerted effort to get Harrison Jr. involved. You saw a concerted effort to, let Brissett throw, I think, 22 times in the first half there. So I think Drew Petzing, I think Jonathan Gannon are going to be able to say with Jacoby Brissett in there, hey, this dude's a savvy veteran. He has a good command of our offense. Let's let him throw the ball downfield since our running game is really hit or miss and hot hand riding in a committee situation. So I think this gives the Cardinals passing game a much higher floor. I'd be excited about that if I am a fantasy manager who has Trey McBride or Marvin Harrison Jr. on my roster.
All right, Jacob, and the last name on your sleepers list this week is Dalton Schultz. Now, we've talked about the Texans on this podcast before, and the offense is a little bit disjointed here and there. It doesn't look like it's quite hitting on all cylinders under first-year offensive coordinator Nick Caley, and CJ Stroud hasn't looked like himself. What do you see from Dalton Schultz this week that you're so comfortable naming him a fantasy sleeper?
Yeah, I just mentioned the higher floor with the Cardinals passing offense with Jacoby Brissett. This is another high floor option at tight end. This is a week where Tucker Kraft's now out for the season. Travis Kelce and Jake Ferguson are on bye. So fantasy tight end is very thin this week. It's been deeper than usual this year, but a guy like Schultz is the type of dude who, if you need a 1 or 2 week fill in, he's the perfect guy that has a high floor to just keep your lineup afloat. Over his last 4 games, he's averaging 64.75 receiving yards per game. He doesn't have a touchdown yet this season, but he could get one against the Jaguars defense that's allowed the second most fantasy points per game to tight ends and just got shredded by Brock Bowers. Now, granted, Dalton Schultz, nowhere near the player that Brock Bowers is, but there is a weakness in that Jaguars defense. And I think whether it's CJ Stroud or Davis Mills playing, Schultz has shown that he has the chemistry needed with the quarterbacks to be a viable fantasy option this week.